Hello there! Welcome back everyone to Void Dwarf Studios, where we continue with our look into the Kharadon Overlords. And today we are looking at the Marines, you could say, of the Kharadon airships. Your Archanaut company, if you're thinking about this in Imperial Navy type terms, back in the good old days of flintlock and musket, the Archanaut company were kind of the ship crew, you know? They were trained to a certain extent, but they were by no means the best at what they do. However, there is a much more professional armed force, and they are known as the Grundstok Thunderers, a militarized formation employed for fleet-wide defense against any hostile targets that intend to board you. Whilst their main task, as I've said, is to repel boarders with their fantastic dwarven guns, they are equally comfortable to leap out of their ships, descend from the various skyhooks or ladders, and begin blasting away at anything that tries to take a defensive position. The Grundstok academies are considered the highest standard of military discipline and marksmanship that any Duradin or Duradin or Dwarf, or however you want to say it for Age of Sigmar, aspires to take part in. These dwarven individuals are spared no expense in terms of outfitting in their armour. This dwarf that will be given the finest arms and armour that a Kharadon Overlord can get. The only thing that is better quality will be an Archanaut Admiral, armed with an ether shot rifle which fires a hypercharged blast of condensed ether. It's kind of like an energy gun of sorts, or maybe plasma might be a way to describe it. It's a wonderful piece of dwarven technology, and each one of your Grundstok Thunderers can take a different weapon if they so chose. The ether cannon works on the same principle as the ether rifle, except, it's bigger, heftier, with a much higher chance of complete and utter death. A fumigator, which belches noxious fumes and gases that, it's gonna make you feel very unwell very quickly. One of my personal favourites, the multi-barrel deck sweeper, which is, there to essentially remove lots of targets at once, and the mortar that lobs a high-arcing shell that explodes and creates all kinds of mess. And if you're feeling particularly fancy, you can have the double-barreled ether rifle, so you can get those extra shots off and increase your rate of firepower. Now, you can choose to take each one with a specialist item, or you could give them all ether rifles if you so chose. And the Grundstok Thunderer always carries what is known as an Honour Bearer, an ancestral standard that holds a record of the unit's proud history. And if you lose this in battle, you might as well shave your beard and go off and get yourself killed, because that's how everyone will look at you for the rest of your life. And a fun little thing, every officer is usually accompanied by what is known as an ethermatic bird, or drill bill, a little mechanical contraption that sits on this officer's shoulder and quite happily pecks and drills out the eyes or skulls of anyone who gets too close. Typically, they are transported on board Archanaut frigate or ironclad, and they are a reserve force that is ready to disembark when they feel necessary. Grundstok Marines are not shy at all about displaying their fantastic skills with marksmanship, and on occasion this can cause friction between the various different units, each one vying for more glory and more gold. Grundstok Thunderers are a fun unit. I have 2 of them, and I'm very fond of them. Whilst the profile is fairly unassuming, 2 wounds, which is pretty good for a dwarf, 4-inch movement, a 4+ save and 7 bravery, it is of course the weapons that makes the dwarf. 1 in every 5 models can replace their ether shot rifle with either a gunstruck mortar, an ether cannon, an etheric fumigator, or a deck sweeper. And your sergeant, your gunnery sergeant, who leads the unit, can replace his normal ether rifle for a double-barreled one. Now, the ether shot rifle is by no means a slouch. 18-inch range, 2 shots, hitting on 3s, wounding on 4s, -1 rend and 1 damage, and the double-barrel version has 4 shots instead, with the same profile. Your maximum range for this unit is 18 inches, which, whilst, not going to outshoot cannons or anything like that, is still a very respectable range. The etheric fumigator, which is a wonderful, wonderful choking hazard, has a 9-inch range, 3 attacks, hitting and wounding on 3s with a -1 rend and 1 damage. It's shorter range, but it has the advantage that it's easier to hit and wound things on. The deck sweeper, which is my personal favourite, probably because it kind of reminds me of the organ gun that the dwarves from Warhammer Fantasy had, but it's a portable version. is a 12-inch range weapon with 4 attacks that hit and wound on 4s with -1 rend and 1 damage. The Ether Cannon is 12 inches, a single shot, that hits on a 4, wounds on a 2, -2 rend and d3 damage. And then, of course, we have the Grundstok Mortar. 12 inches, 1 attack, hitting on a 4, wounding on a 3, with no rend but d3 damage. That seems kind of meh compared to the others. However, it is the special rules that help them be more effective, because the Fumigator, for example, has a special rule. Subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made by enemy models within 3 inches of any friendly model armed with a Fumigator. This ability cannot be used by a model that is part of a garrison. So yeah, what that means is that when people are trying to hit you in close combat, the Fumigator gives you a chance to make it easier to back up, as these guys are not going to be very good in close combat. Whilst the drill build that your sergeant has can do d3 attacks that hit and wound on a 4 with -1 rend and 1 damage, the rest of your dudes are going to have to live with having a gun butt as their melee weapon, which is a single attack that hits and wounds on a 4, 1 damage. Yeah, this is a unit you don't want to get into close combat if you can possibly help it, and that's why you are very fond of a particular special rule. The Honor Bearer, the dude who has the relic from your unit's past, means that you can re-roll battle shock tests, and that's handy considering your bravery is only 7, and if you start taking too many hits, your unit's going to disappear quite rapidly. And to make sure that you get the most bang for your buck as well, the special rule Drive Them Back means you get to add 1 to your missile attacks when there's an enemy unit within 3 inches. Yeah, so suddenly your double barrel rifle has 5 shots, your normal has 3, Fumigator gets an extra, Deck Sweeper suddenly is having 5 attacks, and even your Ether Cannon gets 2, or your Mortar. The rate of fire that you can pump out from these guys, especially if you took them in a unit of 10 instead of 5, is actually quite amazing. And the final special rule, Pin Them, Shred Them, Finish Them, is to do with the combinations of your Mortar, Deck Sweeper and Ether Cannon. You add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made by a Grundstok Mortar, Deck Sweeper or Ether Cannon when it is used by a unit that has at least 1 of each of these weapons. Again, this is an ability that cannot be used when you're part of a garrison, so inside the building or inside your airship. So suddenly those weapons that normally hit on 3s, that normally hit on 4s, suddenly hit on 3s if you have them in that combination, Mortar or Deck Sweeper or Ether Cannon, one of those 2 combinations. Personally, I'm very fond of having a Deck Sweeper and a Grundstok Mortar or Ether Cannon, simply because the Ether Cannon's great against anything with a high number of wounds, and, wounds quite easily. And when you're close to your enemy, not only do you get an extra attack, but it's hitting on 3s, whilst your Ether Shot rifles are hitting on 2s. In fact, believe it or not, I've actually had tons of fun just having an entire unit of Grundstok Thunderers with the Ether Shot rifles. Because, whilst they may not pack as much punch as some of their special weapons, the number of shots you can pump out, like if you're within 3 inches, you've got 3 shots with the basic Ether Shot rifle, and it's going to punch through things eventually, and the double barrel one becomes 5 shots. Yeah, that's kind of amazing. And as long as you took a Mortar, a Deck Sweeper, and an Ether Cannon, the rest of your unit can all be armed with the Ether Shot rifles, and get that wonderful hitting on 2+. That's all kind of crazy. But, as I said again, this is a unit you do not wish to get into close combat at all, so make sure that they stay far enough away, or at the very least, if they're going to move up, make sure you've got some way to prevent them from, being charged. Otherwise, these poor dwarves will disappear fairly quickly. I hope you've enjoyed this little video on the Kharadon Overlords. Please feel free to like and subscribe. Put a comment down below, let me know how you like to use your Kharadon Overlord forces, and I hope wherever you are, you're having a great day. Until then, take care everyone.